Hello guys, it's UnoPro here and we are back with a very exciting video. Massive news has come to the game, and that is a massive new rebalancing patch that really has just changed a massive number of cards. First of all, the biggest news is that Denizens of Shimza is coming back in. Not going to be rotation, which is good for queue times, good for players who already had the existing cards. I think it's definitely a good change overall and gives a lot of new options to factions. Gives us some more diversity. Not that Duelyst was honestly lacking in it too much, though Wanderer decks were a bit of an issue. So we'll be talking about that. I will try and link in what comes back with Shimza. Mainly I'm focusing on Songhai because that's mainly what I know most. So I'm mainly going to focus on how the cards actually work. But there are a lot of new tools coming back in, and it's important to consider everything under a new lens, where we also have these Shimza cards coming in. So let's get straight to the first card. That is Dawn's Eye. So I'm not going to take too long on each card. I will read out the card and the changes for people who, just listening and not watching the video. Plus, it doesn't actually say on the screen where it is. So Dawn's Eye just basically has mana cost reduced from 6 to 5, and it's a general, gains 4 attack, and at the end of turn, repair all of your artifacts to full durability. It's not really a card that's really been overly powerful. It does now curve after Regalia, which is really what you want to be using it with. So you can maybe see it in decks that want to focus and play around the strength of Regalia. I'm not overly sure that's necessarily too much of a powerful thing, just because you'd rather just play another Regalia a lot of the time, or you already have this kind of great situation where you have a Regalia. I'm not really sure I'm looking to capitalize on having a Regalia too much. So I don't think it's saying too much play with Regalia, even that's the obvious way to look at it. Obviously the card's a lot better. We always need to be really careful of these ones that get their mana cost reduced and no other changes, because if they're even remotely viable, sometimes that can really make them very strong. It's quite possible this could be even in an aggro, like an aggro Argene or something. You play it, hit them for 6 with your general or clear a minion, and then you're back and now suddenly have a 6 attack general, falls, and if you're the one on the attack, then you probably have a clear board against your opponent, and now they have this artifact that's really hard to get rid of. They have to basically do it all in one turn. If you're versing a lot of Wanderer decks and stuff that play like 1 minion at a time, that could be really good. So could possibly see some play. Wouldn't be too surprised. Like it wasn't terrible, and it's getting a 1 mana cost reduction. So that's always something that we need to keep in mind. So Peacekeeper is our next one. Had the stats change from a 5/5 to a 6/6. Not expecting too much from this one, just because I don't think really the issues with this card was that when it lives, it doesn't do enough. It would come down, it would live, it would do 10 damage basically anywhere with Force Field, Provoke Celerity. It's just a bundle of stats, all the keywords. I don't think the issue was the stats. Helps a little bit, maybe it nudges it into viability in some decks, but I don't really think it's going to change too much with the 6/6. A pretty irrelevant change there. Could be wrong, but I don't think the 1/1 extra in stats was really what I was missing. Next one is there's a lot of not massive significant changes, so we'll kind of go quickly through some of them. Radiant Dragoon. So now the only change is that it can target itself, which, I mean, if there's a deck that kind of wanted this effect before, it does get a lot better in the fact that if you're going second, you can now play it on turn 1 and it becomes a 3/5 before being a 3/4, which is a decently significant change. Not really sure this changes too much, but if there's a deck that wanted this before, now that deck probably gets better. I'm not really sure that this brings you into wanting to play other decks with it, so I don't really think this will change too much, but the card does get significantly better when it's played alone. Oh, and yeah, I'm not really convinced that it makes too big of a difference. If you wanted to play this card before, you kind of wanted to get buffs on the stuff you're playing, presumably. Maybe it's okay. Pretty insignificant change. Now the next one is definitely not insignificant, and that is Solarius. So it had its cost reduced from 6 to 5, and as a downside, it lost 1 health. Now this is definitely a buff for the card. I think it gets significantly better. Being able to draw for 5 mana is a lot easier than drawing for 6, though it does come with a bit of an asterisk in that, sure, 5 is getting a lot easier to get to than 6 because of the way mana tiles work, but you don't really want to be playing this on 5. And later on in the game, the difference between 5 and 6 mana isn't that big a deal. So if it didn't see that much play before, you probably won't see that much play now, but it did see some play, I seem to remember, and it's 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 a decent option in some grindier battles. I can see maybe there's a one of in these Wanderer decks that really want some card draw. Late game, you stick it once, draw 2 cards for 5. That's already pretty good in a grindy battle, and it threatens to draw extra cards if it lives. Wasn't a bad card to begin with. I could already see some use potential, not as like a 3 of in common decks, but definitely as like a 1 or a 2 of in some decks that really want the card draw. Seems pretty fine. I definitely don't think it's a bad card at all. Something to consider if you're looking for card draw in Lyonar. Alright, Songhai, my favorite faction. So, we have Bombard is our first one. This got reduced from 6 to 5, and it says reactivate your minions with ranged. I've really never seen anyone play this card. I'm not even excited to play it myself. It really does need a lot of setup. If you have, it's like the idea is that you're going face, right? But you're really overpaying for it. If you just have a bunch of under 3 attack range units, you just use inner focuses, and it's the same thing. It's cheaper. Or if you have bigger minions, you probably want to use Assassin's Protocol. You're really going to be overpaying a lot for mana, and saving it in cards is really not what you want to be doing, because you're spending just so much more mana, and you need to have 2 range minions on the board, which one is already kind of win more, and it's just not that likely to even happen. So not expecting this to really make any change. I mean, it's a good change. It makes the card better because the card was just terrible. I think it's still pretty bad, but maybe it makes these fun little range decks a little bit better. I don't think there's that many board states where you have a lot of range minions available and you're not already in a good spot, so don't really see this one doing too much of an impact. Next one is Calligrapher. This was a card I was surprised to see buffed. I've actually been running in my Mithron Reaver, and I had a lot of success with it. The card was surprisingly good, and it gets a hell of a lot better. It's a 7 mana, 3/7 rush, and whenever it attacks, it puts 3 Songhai spells straight into your action bar, and before, it only gave it to you at the end of turn. Now, putting it straight away is really good. Often, there's a couple spells or one spell that's really bad. You give the option to replace that immediately, and if you're drawing, quote-unquote bad cards since they're not in your deck, then you often want to replace them. So being able to replace them immediately is a big upside. Songhai does have a lot of cheap spells, so if you play this on 9, you can actually, good chance you can use what you draw, which is really powerful. So this is a pretty decent buff. I'm still not sure if it will really change where it's used. It's basically only been used in Mithron Reaver, and I guess a couple of weird late Songhai decks, but for the most part, Mithron Reaver was the home for this. Obviously, it's better, but maybe this is something we could run as like a 1 of, or maybe a 2 of in like a kind of more mid-rangey late game Songhai deck. Definitely the card gets better. I'm not sure if it really changes too much. The main issue was playing a 3 attack minion for 7 mana, which is pretty damn bad. But it does get better, and the card wasn't completely unusable before. Definitely something to consider. Okay, Cold Fist is an interesting one. So it's a 4 mana, 5/4 with Intensify. Give a random minion nearby this +2 attack. So it's kind of like a Primus on a 5/4 body. You have a little bit less control over it, though it shouldn't be too much of an issue. But it gets better with Intensify. 5/4 stats is really bad. Making it so it was a 4/4. Making it a 5/4 doesn't really change too much, I don't think. Obviously, the card home for this is like an aggressive minion-based Songhai, and maybe like that deck now doesn't want Thunderhorn because of the nerfs, but yeah, I'm still not seeing this card doing too much play, but it does get better in the shell that it works. Maybe there's a world where we ever run some of these if we just want aggression on 4, but I can't really see it, so. Dusk Rigger is a pretty simple one. So it was a 3 mana 2/3 with Backstab 2, and whenever you backstab, put a Mechazor progression into your action bar. Now it's a 3/3, which compares it to Gorehorn. Obviously, the effect in a non-Mechazor deck is useless. It's just worse than Gorehorn. In a Mechazor deck, it's probably pretty good. Like, you get to kind of run a Gorehorn that probably has more of an upside than getting 1/1. So it's probably fine like a Kalios Mechazor deck. I think how much impact this card has purely come down to Mechazor. I think there's a decent chance it makes the fit in a Mechazor deck. Even then, I'm not overly sure. Like, you really do have to work just to get the same level of Mechazor progression as like a Sword of Mechazor. So, I mean, this card's probably not great. If you are looking for extra 3 drops, though, in a Mechazor deck, it's better. So, not really much has changed. The 3 attack doesn't do that much compared to the 2/3. Alright, next one is Katara. This is our nerf with Songhai. I'm not too happy about this one, but I can completely see why they did it. That's probably fair. The backstab 3, so it's a 1 mana 1/3 with backstab 1. It wasn't 1 mana 1/3 with backstab 3. Obviously, this hurts a lot. You now no longer kill 4 drops. So this becomes much more of a just, I want to vomit my handout card rather than a threat on its own. So maybe if you're playing stuff, if you're playing a lot of card draw and you just want like a minion-based build, like with Primus Fist and Killing Edges and stuff, this is still okay. With a Mist Dragon, kill a 3 HP minion, though I'd rather play the Scroll Bandit a lot of the time. It does a similar thing. Maybe it's not that bad. Like, it's just basically a Scroll Bandit for 1 less mana, but you don't get the card draw effect. And a lot of matchups, the card draw effect's not the worst thing ever. Maybe this still see some play. Like, it's definitely not a bad card still. Backstab 2 doesn't do much by itself, so it doesn't work really well with Juxta, but it still works fine with Mist Dragon. Maybe this card can see some play, like an Ethereal Blades kind of deck where you just want a minion to stick. This does give you... I mean, Tuskball makes this card better as well, because you can go Tuskball into Katara, turn 1 going first. There's some potential here. I wouldn't be surprised if the card saw some play. Obviously, it's a lot worse. And it is competing for spots with Scroll Bandit. I guess it will really depend on how heavy your card draw. The more heavy your card draw you want, the less you even want the Scroll Bandit's card draw ability, and the more you value the ability to actually spew out your hand with 1-drops. It's a lot easier to get rid of 1-drops in your hand than it is 2-drops. So maybe if you're running like 3 Sojourner or 3 Lantern Fox, Katara will be the choice over Scroll Bandit. Something to consider. Alright, next one is Manakite Drifter. So, Manakite Drifter is a 4 mana 5/5 with build 2, and when it's built, it gains 2 mana this turn. So before the nerfs, it was a 3/3, now it's a 5/5, so you're basically getting a on-stat minion for 4 mana, but you're getting it 2 turns later, and you're getting 2 mana back. So I guess technically it can be a 2 mana 5/5, but it comes out on turn 6. Don't think this card was really very good before. I don't think making a 5/5 makes a big difference. I mean, maybe if you're wanting... The idea with this is you want to ramp, right? So what can you ramp with? If you play it on turn 2, it gets built on your 4 mana turn, built on your 5 mana turn, it comes out turn 6. So I guess you can ramp it to an 8-drop if you're going first and your 2-drop lives. I doubt there's much we want to really do with that. Maybe if there's some big tools like that. Yeah, I mean, maybe as a ramp card this is okay, but I don't think for the most part, I don't think Songhai really wants to be ramping anyway. So I'm not really expecting very much from this card. Maybe if it was in other factions it could do something, but in Songhai I don't think there's much. Now the next one is one I am personally very excited for, and that is a buff to Mask of Shadows. So those of you who don't remember, back in the old days, a long time ago now, Mask of Shadows used to give 2 attack and have backstab 4, which would actually let you hit for 8 with it. Now, instead it hits for 7 now if you backstab, which is still really good. And I think the difference between 1 attack and 0 attack on an artifact is just so massive. Now 2/3s aren't trading in positively to it. It just does something even when you can't backstab. And we also saw a buff to another card which synergizes as well, which we'll get to very shortly. So I do think this actually has some potential. Depends how many 2/3s in the meta. There's more 1/4s these days than there used to be, but I do think Mask of Shadows can still be quite good. Really does give us options, and does actually lend itself to artifact builds as well, which we've seen in the past with Cyclone Mask, the Celerity Mask, Crescent Spear, and we do have Crescent Spear back because Shimzar is back. So I think this card actually does have a lot of potential. I think I'm definitely going to be experimenting with it. I think it's just so much better than it was. Like a 0 attack artifact is really hard to do, and it was a 0 mana artifact that did nothing by itself. Maybe Mask of Shadows could be a 1 or 2 of in aggro Songhai. I personally play Crescent Spear often when I don't have that many spells. Maybe that's just a Mask of Shadows slot, and you change up the deck a little bit for it, but maybe you don't even have to change it up that much. Interesting to see where it goes. Definitely a card that will at least see some play early on, and we'll figure out how good it is, but there's a lot of potential there. I expect people to be testing it for sure. I definitely will be. Next one is Mind Cage Oni. This one I was a little bit surprised on. So it's 3 mana, 3/3. Well, it's a Sentinel, so it comes in as a 3/3. But it's actually a 3/2 in stats now. It was a 4/3. So -1/-1 on the stats. No compensation. Whenever your opponent casts a spell, put a copy of that spell into your action bar. This card, I think, is basically dead now. I think it's terrible. It's not going to be doing anything. I mean, sure, it can be some spell drawing a lot of times, but you're drawing your opponent's spells, which is worse than drawing your own spells 90% of the time. And you can't play it aggressive at all. You have to play it super far back because your opponent can just cast a spell and hit with their general since it's a 3-2. I don't think this card is going to see much play. I think it's a lot worse. It wasn't that amazing to begin with. It was definitely constructed viable, but it always felt like one of the worst cards in the deck because I'm playing a 3-mana 3-3, or I guess a 4-mana 3-3 sometimes. I mean, a 3-mana 4-3, just to draw my opponent's spells, which I often don't want. So I'd probably just rather say like Lantern Fox now, or Sojourner, or the other 3 card draw options. So this card I think is pretty much just dead. I think most people would agree with that. I guess maybe you still run it in Mithron Reaver, but just because you already run the other Sentinels and having the ability to play the different ones and confuse your opponent is good, probably won't see much fun. The next one is Penumbrax, which is a 3-mana 4-1 with build 2, backstab 2. And whenever it backstabs, it transforms into a building with build 1. So once this card is actually active, it's quite good because you can backstab, it goes back into a building, so it's basically protected, and you can keep doing that. And the 1 health doesn't really matter because you build and then you get to attack with it, and then you get to go back into the building. So the 1 health doesn't actually matter too much. I still think this card probably is the 1 attack. So it was a 3-1, now it's a 4-1. And you get back in the habit of saying all the cards for people who are just listing. Going up 1 attack isn't really making a difference. It does 6 damage instead of 5 damage when backstabbing, which is basically all this card can really be wanting to do, is backstab. I don't think the 6 threshold makes a big difference. If it didn't see play before, it's not going to see play now. Though the option of, I mean, it's a card that's not that bad, and it gets better. Maybe in certain metas, I'm not exactly sure when. It could be good, but you just give build 2 is just always going to be hard to be viable. I don't really know of any build 2 cards that have really seen much play at the top ranks. I haven't seen it. I see them every now and then, people trying them out, but they never seem to do that well. So I'm not really confident in saying any build 2 card is really going to see that much play. It hasn't really before, and I don't think 1 attack changes this one. Alright, next one is Sparrowhawk, which got a lot better. So it's a 3-mana 3-3 with Bond. Put a Mist Dragon Seal into your action bar. It was a 3-2, so getting that 1 extra health is obviously massive. I think the biggest health jump is always going to be 2 to 3, just because of general hits. Having an Arcanist out is kind of tough though. So this card is obviously I actually think it's a really good card in an Arcanist deck. My issue is more how good Arcanist decks are going to be. Obviously going this into Shakri is not bad, but it's kind of hard to stick the artifact, Arcanist, and you don't always want to be misdragging them in. So don't really think Arcanist decks are going to be good enough. If they are good enough in Songhai, then this is probably an include though. It's like a 3. It's like typically we draw in Songhai on 3 mana anyway, and this draws immediately into a pretty good card, above average a lot of the time. So I think this could be pretty good. Just really depends on Arcanist decks. So our next one is Suzumbaki, something like that. This card has got my attention now. So it's a 2-mana 1-4. It was a 2-mana 1-3, and it has whenever you cast a spell, this minion gains 1 attack until your next turn. So it's kind of like a Chakri that doesn't grow permanently, and it doesn't grow the health. But burst-wise, is actually pretty much the same the turn after it's played. So maybe to see some potential 4 health can be pretty important if you're doing like a Songhai meta or a lot of like blood tears around. The 4th health does actually make a pretty big difference. So this is to give it a niche. You do need to be running a lot of spells. You want to consistently be able to get it to 3-4 in a natural way, so you can kill 2 3s. If you can do that, it becomes a pretty decent card. Not keeping the boss permanently does hurt it a lot. Obviously, that would be ridiculously OP if it did. But you need to be playing a deck where you naturally want to play those spells. You don't want to be going out of your way to play those spells because you're not really gaining that much from it. But if you're playing a deck that naturally wants to play spells, like somehow you're running Mana Vortexes, making them work, Gotatsu is a good one, then I could see this card seeing some play. It's much more likely to live with Shakri, which is important for these decks that maybe don't play a lot of minions to contest the mana tiles. And it also lets you run more than 3 Chakras. There's definitely decks that have existed that want more than 3 Chakras. This does a pretty good impersonation, so I could see this seeing some play in very spell-based Songhai builds. Definitely a card that will be on my radar, at least early on in the testing process for the new thing. Could see some play for sure. Alright, let's go to the next card, and that is Twilight Fox. Now this is an important one. This is one that's got me excited for sure. So it's 3 mana, 3/4. It was a 3 mana 3/3, and it has Blood Surge. Teleport a random enemy to the space behind your general. Now 3/4 is obviously a pretty good stat line. It's pretty much on curve for a 3-drop. Plus you want a relevant ability. 3/3 to 3/4. It's a pretty decent difference. It's not actually the biggest thing ever, but it allows you to train to like 2/3s and stuff, and just lives, a lot more often. It's really going to depend how good Mask of Shadows. This is great support for Mask of Shadows. The randomness shouldn't really matter too much. I mean, sometimes it's going to hurt you because you might get their general when you wanted to kill their important minion. But you have stuff like Juxta when you really need it. If you have a Mask of Shadows up, which is not a massive investment, you can actually... it's not, you're not really investing much. You kind of just get a free kill, or you push 7 face damage, which is not bad. So I think going stuff into like... The problem, it's annoying because it's Blood Surge. Like, you can't go Mask of Shadows turn 1 into this. And if you have Cryptographer, then you also can't do it because you need the 1 mana for the Blood Surge. I mean, I guess you could play Mana Vortex or somehow try and get Mana Tiles with Juxta, but for the most part, this is going to have to be a turn 3 play, which is a little bit clunky for a 3-drop, but it's not the end of the world. I mean, if you have a Mask of Shadows at some point in the early turn, then on 4 mana you can play this plus your Bloodborne spell. It's pretty good. Like, say you're playing Reaver, you play a 3/4, you get a Heartseeker, that's already fine for 4 mana, and they've teleported something behind, you Mask of Shadows them, and kill whatever they play, or you hit them for 7, set up to hit them again with Mask of Shadows. I can actually see this working pretty well. This is definitely something I will be testing out. I will be playing Mask of Shadows, Twilight Foxes, and all the Juxtas I can get my hands on. Stuff like that, and seeing how we go. Alright, next one is Grandmaster Zendo. This one's a nerf, but it is not a really crushing nerf. So 6 mana, 3/6. It was a 4/6, and the enemy in general moves and attacks automatically. This does really hurt it in the decks where it was relying on just, playing Zendo into the enemy general. They hit it for 4, and it's 4 damage, and it develops a threat. Doing 3 damage is a fair bit worse because often if the Zendo lives, it kind of multiplies. So any attack nerf is actually going to be decently significant on Zendo because you often want to attack with it, and then they attack back into it with their general. Though I think this card is still very, very good. And it also can be Inner Focus now. So now on 7 mana, you can actually Inner Focus, attack for 3, and attacks back in. So it does 6 damage instead. Before, if you just had Zendo and Inner Focus in hand, you do 4 damage. Though Inner Focus often will add damage anyway. So compared to pre-nerf, it's only adding 2 damage. But I think this is still pretty fine. I will definitely be playing this. It does get a bit, it stays good in decks like mid-range Kalios, where Hammond and Thunderhorn are often the targets you want it to attack into anyway. Though in something like Aggro High, it does get worse because you often rely on the Zendo itself to be the one taking the hit. I think this does shift decks back into, and combined with the Thunderhorn change, it does think we go back towards more of an Inner Focus build compared to an Assassin's Protocol build, because we lose like the Thunderhorn nerf because Zendo goes down to 3. I could definitely see that kind of thing happening. So I think Inner Focus builds will be kind of the way going forward, whereas at the moment we've kind of seen a little bit more Assassin's Protocol, I would even say, mainly because mid-range Kalios has been the main mid-range Songhai of choice. Alright, so that has been 24 minutes. This is much shorter than I would want, but I do have a basketball game. I did want to get this video out as soon as I can, so that will be part 1. In the other video, we might even make it 3 parts potentially. Probably just do one really long part 2, which seems a bit weird, but I wanted to get it out as soon as I could. I couldn't wait to get home and talk about the cards. I'll go play basketball, come back, probably record it again. I do have actually I'll give you guys a little bit of a sneak peek. I guess some of you might be interested. Actually, no, it's too much of an effort with the overlay. But I have got an Aggro High deck that's been built. It's got me to number 6 on the ladder. It's been doing pretty well. Using the new changes. Could be really good. So that's the Songhai. We've got Katara back. We've got Crescent Spear. We got some tools. there's a lot to work with here. Mask of Shadows is good again. I'm very, very excited. I really like all the balance changes. There was no Wanderer, which I was going to talk about, but we might talk about that more in another video. Interesting to see how it works out. I think it actually might be fine, but we'll talk about it more in the next video. Thank you very much for watching, guys. Like and subscribe if you want to see more. I'll see you very shortly in the next review.